Many people move to Los Angeles and are still currently moving to Los Angeles in hopes of becoming a famous actor or having an aspiring career in Hollywood. Today, we'll be talking about how that industry and the city of Los Angeles failed one woman in particular who never even got a real chance at life. Today, we'll be talking about the tragic case of the Black Dahlia and how the city of Los Angeles is still profiting off of her death to this very day. On January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth Short's body was found segmented in two pieces. The LAPD at the time believed that the culprit must have been a surgeon or a medical student at the nearby University of Southern California due to how precise and clean the cuts were. Another interesting detail is there was no blood at all at the scene of where her body was placed. Short's body had other wounds, aside from the very obvious injury, including slash marks at the corner of her mouth, creating an effect known as the Glasgow smile. It's basically to create an effect similar to Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, making a creepy elongated smile by cutting parts at the corner of the mouth. There were a litany of other slash marks across Short's thighs and breasts, and her body was posthumously adjusted to be posed. The case of death was determined to be a compound of the facial lacerations as well as multiple blows to the head. What happened next is probably the grossest thing of all, which is saying something considering the specific brutality of this case. But the way the media and the newspapers handled this situation, the death, the murder of an innocent, ordinary young woman, is completely appalling and really disgusting. After getting inside information that Short was the confirmed victim of the murder, reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner reached out to Short's mother, Phoebe, who was living hundreds of miles away in Boston. However, these reporters didn't inform Short's mother of her death, instead telling her that her daughter had just won a beauty contest in Hollywood. I guess the reporters did this as a way to trick the mother, into giving as many personal details and stories that they could use for juicy pieces about Elizabeth and just keep her on the phone line as long as possible. So, after hours of being on the phone line, bragging about her daughter, thinking about how happy she was that she's in a completely different state, having a very nice time pursuing her career, and then shortly later, after they've received all the details they need, they tell her, actually, your daughter's dead, by the way. She was cut in half. Thanks. And hang up. These guys were literally like the lowest of the low scum who just wanted the most juicy story possible. Mind you, this is about an ordinary young woman who was cut in half, not a Hollywood gossip piece about an affair or something like that. And on top of all that, these douchebags had the nerve to offer the mother tickets to LA to help with the investigation, which was really just an insincere ploy to get even more info from her and prevent other news outlets from talking with her. That brings me to my next point, which is just how weird all these people who ran newspapers were. Like, these guys are obviously like scumbags and losers, and they're the ones I'm highlighting, but like all the papers were doing this. This wasn't an uncommon thing. I mean, they just wanted to make this the weirdest, most risque story possible, when in reality it's just like this lady got killed, like in a really brutal, graphic way. And in terms of like the name, for instance, how she got her name as the Black Dahlia and how this became a famous case is literally because there was a movie out at the time called The Blue Dahlia, and everyone described Elizabeth as being memorable for her like jet black hair. Yeah, that's why they called her that. Oh man, that's really clever, guys. Yo, Jim, this random girl just died a super horrific death. Let's use it to market that new movie coming out. Fucking pound it, bro. Just to further prove the effort of the newspapers to make this some crazy, super hyped up, scandalous story, they settled on the Black Dahlia instead of the werewolf murders. That's not even all. The media tried its best to portray Elizabeth as some prostitute, although people who knew her described her as a relatively pretty normal girl who just wanted to pursue a career in acting, and that was only from a handful of people that knew her. In reality, Elizabeth Short was just a young girl from the East Coast trying to find her way.
As a teenager, she struggled with respiratory issues that required lung surgery and forced her to spend winters in Florida to help her breathe. She was engaged to an Air Force major who died in a plane crash during the final days of World War II. The papers painted her as fame-hungry, but really she was just a 22-year-old working odd jobs in Los Angeles, trying to make ends meet, which a lot of people can probably relate to. After the murder and all the stuff with the reporters, an anonymous caller reached out to the Examiner and claimed to be Short's murderer, saying he'll turn himself in to the police once they get closer to finding him. 3 days later, an envelope was sent into the Examiner containing some of Elizabeth's belongings, including her birth certificate and pictures of her. Luckily, the police discovered fingerprints on the packaging and sent them to the FBI to test. However, they were contaminated in transit and were not able to be actually analyzed. The police conducted thousands of investigations into the case, and the person who seemed to be the prime suspect was Mark Hansen. Hansen was a wealthy nightclub and theater owner, and was good friends with Elizabeth. However, an address book with Mark Hansen's name on it was included in the envelope of Elizabeth's belongings, and friends of theirs said that Elizabeth had recently rejected sexual advances by Mark prior to her death. Hansen was eventually cleared by LAPD, and over 60 men came forward in that time, claiming to be the murderer due to how famous the case had become nationwide. The investigation was such a circus that they even looked at folk singers and movie directors. They were so obsessed with finding a famous ending to the story that they stopped looking for the person who actually killed the 22-year-old girl and a big headline they could brand instead. To say the media and police department ruined the chances of finding her actual killer would be a humongous understatement.
Elizabeth Short's murderer was never found. Her case remains one of the most notorious cold cases in not only California's history, but America's history as well. However, there is one man who's certain he knows who the murderer is. He's a former LAPD detective, and he believes the murderer was his own father.
Steve Hodel served as a detective for the LAPD for 24 years. He had a very nice upbringing due to the financial success of his father, George Hodel, who was a well-known and rather eccentric doctor. Hodel was initially named one of the prime suspects in the murder, as he had previously had a relationship with Short and was already being looked at for the murder of his secretary and claims he had R-worded his own daughter. Great guy. Steve also claims letters from his father strike a remarkable resemblance to the ones sent to the Examiner during the Black Dahlia case. Records from the 1949 grand jury case revealed that Hodel was captured on wiretaps from the FBI stating, and I quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary either because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her? Maybe I did kill my secretary." End quote. A lot of people since then feel this was more than adequate enough evidence to at least make Hodel stand trial. However, it is rumored that he performed many unsavory favors for Los Angeles politicians and police officers, including many secretive abortions and treatment for venereal diseases.
So then, that's the video, right? We're all done. Well, I wish I could tell you yes, but the weird dehumanization and sensationalism around Elizabeth Short's murder has still been continued to this very day.
The Museum of Death is a small museum in Hollywood that specializes in, well, death. The museum contains a lot of serial killer artwork and letters, along with other generally shocking images like baby coffins and graphic crime scenes. One of those being heavily featured is the Black Dahlia crime scene. The museum used to hold a look-alike contest in the early 2000s to late 2010s, where contestants were encouraged to look as realistic to Elizabeth as possible. That includes the slash marks and paleness from her lifeless body that was famously captured in photographs. They even have a little pin set of her bisected body. How nice.
Now, I don't want to morally grandstand because at the end of the day, people are free to do whatever they want. But we can also admit, this is a little weird, right? I mean, let's be real here. I think it's one thing to be interested in true crime, serial killers even. I mean, that's kind of weird in itself, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it's like interesting people and you want to learn more about their psyche and all of that. This lady wasn't one of those people. She was literally just an innocent young woman in her 20s who was brutally murdered for essentially what seems to be no reason, or at least not one that they could find enough cause to actually find the right perpetrator. Yet she's made into this weird fixation, and even though this happened 80 years ago, she's still being basically slandered and dehumanized. I mean, do you think if she was around today, she'd really want one of these pins? But that's all, guys. Just something to think about.
If you made it to this point of the video, I just want to say thank you so much, and I really appreciate the support. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be uploading a lot more content like this in the future. And remember, they are with us. Be careful out there, guys.